This is a tutorial on how to use docx read transcript function to read a docx file into R for use with the QDAP package. Now, a docx file is simply a Microsoft Word or an OpenOffice document. And typically a researcher will have a transcript look something like this. They'll have a header. Headers do not affect read docx or read transcript. And then they'll have generally two columns. Now, the read transcript function, if you're reading in a docx file, must be in a two-column format. Here we have person and then dialogue, and that's generally the case for how most transcribers keep their data set. Also notice that in between the person and their dialogue is a colon. Read transcript also, if you're reading a docx file, needs a colon or some other type of separator. It could be a dash, it could be whatever you want, as long as it's consistent. I would recommend you use a colon because that's the default of read transcript. And you may also have information like this in brackets. You can delete that if you want by hand, but read docx has methods for parsing that out later pretty nicely. Okay. Sometimes in a document, a transcriber may decide to split a turn of talk, where, like I just did here with Teacher 4, where they break the turn by paragraph or whatever. And sometimes that may give read transcript a problem. If it does, read transcript will try to handle this. If it does give read transcript a problem, you'll have to go in by hand and get rid of those breaks in turn of talk. Another thing that you may want to do, and it's recommended you do, is to take read dialogue, that's something that's read from a book or a poem or a play, and denote it as such. Now right here we have read dialogue from Mubalala. It's my daughter's favorite book right now. And generally a researcher will denote that, hey, this is read dialogue with a boldface or an italics or curly quotes. Curly quotes are these special characters, and they're the default of Microsoft Word. And what is recommended is that if you have read dialogue, you show that with curly braces or some other bracket. Curly braces is the one that I would recommend, though. And the reason is, once you read that into R has some nice functions, bracket X and bracket extract, for parsing that information out or putting that information back together as just a book. If you keep it as italics or bold, that information will be lost. If just your read dialogue is in curly quotes, there is an argument to read transcript that will allow you to insert brackets, curly braces or brackets in its place. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look at R. And first thing you'll do is load QDAP with library command. And here we have a convenience function called URL DL download, and that's not really important to you as a researcher, but it's important for demoing along at home. If you want a transcript that you and I both are looking at that's the same, this function will allow us to do that, and it's going to allow us to download from the internet to our working directory this transcript1.docx file. One other note that just reminds me that if you have your file as a doc file, that's an older version of Word, it needs to be converted to a docx. Read transcript does not handle doc files. Alright, now this URL download, let's look at what happened. In our working directory now, we have the file called Transcript1. Let's open it up and look at it. Yeah, it looks like what we were just looking at. Okay? Alright, let's get out of that and go back into R. Now this is where the research is concerned. That's the read transcript function. Now that you have your transcript in your working directory, at its basic, all you supply to read transcript is the name of the file you're reading in. Let's look at what that looks like. And here we have the person, and here we have the dialogue. Nice argument you may want to take advantage of in read transcript is column names, col.names and you supply to it a vector. Let's call the first one person and the second one dialogue. Let's go ahead and read that in again and see what that looks like now. There, now it has the column names automatically on it. You'll see with the brackets there, and later, this is not a big deal. Later I'll show you other methods for getting rid of these bracketed text. Okay, and let's look at another argument. You remember that I said it was recommended that any red dialogue, you denote that with curly braces. If you have curly quotes around the red dialogue and nothing else, you can use the argument quote to bracket equals true to denote that. Now we didn't, you can see here, because it says cow says moo, that's the beginning of the book, and we don't see those curly braces. Let's go ahead and read it in with curly or quote to bracket equals true and see what it looks like. Now it went and turned any curly quotes into open and closed brackets, and there again at the end. Alright, let's read in another transcript slightly different using URL DL, and that loaded into our working directory. Let's go ahead and look at it. And you'll notice that the only difference in this transcript is instead of colon separators, we have dash separators. And let's try to read that in, and it gives us an error because we have dash separators. So the separator is a dash. We have to tell it that with the argument sep equals dash. Now we read it in. It looks pretty much the same as the last document we read in. Okay, and let's download one last transcript and open it up in our working directory, and you'll notice it looks identical except for here we have some text at the beginning that's not part of the data set. Sometimes transcribers do this. The header will not throw up an error. This will throw up an error because it's not the two-column format. There's no separator in between, so it will throw up an error because there's no separator. It's consistent with the rest of the data set. Let's try to read that in, and it throws up an error. So what we need to do is say, hey, we want to skip that first line because that's not really data anyhow. And we do that with the skip command. Skip equals one line, and we read it in, no error, and it looks like our other data set. All right, let's tidy up a bit. You know, those 3 files we downloaded, if you want to get rid of those, we can use the delete function from QDAP, and we use lapply in this case. We just say lapply to this whole vector of transcripts that we read in. We tell it, hey, delete all those. And you'll see 000, and we go back and look in the working directory, and they are gone. This has been a tutorial on how to use read transcript from the QDAP package to read transcripts, docx transcripts into R for use with the QDAP package.